It's time for the Phil Ferguson Show.
This is Phil Ferguson, and you are listening to the cleverly titled The Phil Ferguson Show. Welcome to the show. It is May of 2022, and I just got back from 2 weeks in Italy. Yay! Had a great time. Continued with COVID theater. Most amusing thing, we left just after the new rule about... new rule or new lack of rule from the court ruling about masks on airplanes. So the plane that we got on, no one was required to wear a mask at all for the entire flight from Chicago to Italy, which was, I guess, nice. I mean, no one really wants to wear a mask, but I don't know. I was comforted by my knowledge that actually being on a plane in your seat anyway, being on a plane in your seat is one of the best places you can be because of the design of the airflow, where you have the vent on over your head, which I always have on maximum anyway. The air comes down over your face, and so if you exhale any virus or water droplets with virus, it's likely going to be pushed down because the entire airflow of the plane, not just over your face, but it's even better for you. But everybody has all of the air coming over them and down and pushing down the virus or the water droplets so they don't go as far because they're constantly being pushed down. And of course, by the floor or in the floor or next to the floor, next to your foot, under the window is a plane length long intake, air return. And so all the air goes in there. And then, of course, airplanes have a very sophisticated and advanced HEPA or HEPA, better than HEPA quality filtration system. So it catches a whole lot of the virus, and there is some fresh air exchange with the outside air, which can't be too generous because at elevation, the air outside is very, very cold. So it is filtered very heavily, very intensely. And the chances of you getting something in a high quality air filtration system like that is lower. I don't know what the numbers would be, but lower, pretty safe, better than sitting in an old timey restaurant with 8 or 10 people around a table and people talking. And of course, on a plane, at least I used to like to talk to people on the plane. Now, no, nope. Who knows? You could be the one person that gets me sick. But anyway, we went to multiple cities over 2 weeks and a couple of days. We went to Genoa. We went to San Gimignano. We went to Lucca. We went to Pisa. Livorno was the surprise location that a lot of people were freaked out about because Livorno is south of Genoa on the western side of Italy, well north of Rome and south of Cinque Terre. But Livorno is a port city. It's a historically famous port city that was built intentionally by the people of Florence because they needed a port to expand their power around that part of the world. And so they found a city and founded a city and built ports intentionally there. And so today it's still a very big and important port city, which makes it kind of a working city. The interesting thing is, because it has such wonderful, large and deep ports, a lot of tour boats, a lot of cruise ships stop in Livorno. And apparently the big problem for the city of Livorno is the first thing these people do is they all get on great big buses and go see Pisa, Lucca, or Florence for the day or two. And they don't do anything in Livorno because Livorno is just a normal functioning fucking city. And you'd think to yourself, why? Why in the fuck would I stop in Livorno and spend time there? But we looked into it. We accidentally found a city because they have a brand new, I don't know what to call it, a piazza, a park, right, that they built on the Mediterranean that is brand new, gigantic, and has basically a chessboard set up, the black and white tiles that are, I don't know, a foot, 18 inches a piece, and a beautiful railing and some other things that are there. And they do have plans to expand it. And everybody from the city gets to walk up and down this thing like half a mile long and enjoy the seaside. Absolutely fantastic. We had a 2-hour walking tour, which told us all about the history of the city. A great place to visit. So if you want to visit a city that is kind of a normal, real city, absolutely fantastic. The other fun little story is that when it was time to get our train to go back, the train station is a good mile plus away, 20, 25, 30 minutes walk. And so we decided to get a cab, but in most places in Italy, the cabs can only be flagged down, they can only be boarded, they can only be called, or you can only get into them in taxi stops. To my knowledge, things like Uber and Lyft are not allowed, so you have to have a taxi. Well, we have no idea where a taxi stand is. We have no idea where a taxi stop is. Couldn't find one. And right across the water, right facing the water, is this ginormous, fancy hotel. So I walk up all these steps because it's up on this little bit of a ridge. I walk up all these steps and I walk inside and I go up to the front desk, and the lady at the front desk looks at me and assumes I'm some kind of tourist, which I am, but I'm just not staying in Livorno, and I'm not staying in their hotel. And this is one of those moments where I cheated. I'm pretty much close to almost fluent in Italian, but I just went up to the counter and I go, "Do you speak English?" And she says, "Yes, sir, I do." And I said, "Is there any chance you could call me a cab?" And she said, "Yes, sir, I'd be happy to call you a cab." And she picks up the phone and she says, "Where are you going?" And I said, "We wanted to go to the train station." And she said, "Great." And so she calls me a cab and she's like, "They'll be here in 4 minutes." And so my wife and I wait out front of the hotel, and we're talking to the guy in the fancy suit there that picks up your luggage and helps you go in. And he says, "Oh, where are you off to today?" And I said, "We're going to the train station and we're going to go visit Lucca." We were actually staying in Lucca, but we were pretending now to go along with this scheme that we were staying in this hotel and going to Lucca for a day visit. Had a great talk, and the cab came up and the guy opened the door for us, and we got in the cab and went to the train station and went back through Pisa, switched to another train to Lucca. A couple other cities whose names escape me now. I will be sharing some photos on Facebook if you're that curious. Of course, if you have questions about Italy or how I learned Italian, I'd be happy to talk your ear off. Just let me know. Today's show, I'm going to keep this a little short. We do have an interview with Rachel Lazar, and I think she is the CEO, Executive Director of Americans United for the Separation of Church and State. Actually, one of the very first organizations I found many years ago when I first saw what would happen when religion was controlling politics. When I stayed for a period of time in Arkansas, I saw what it really would be like, and it scared the ever-living fuck out of me. And I started looking on the internet, and I found Americans United. Absolutely fantastic organization. It is a secular organization, so it's not an atheist organization. If you're an atheist and you want to join, they'd be happy to have you. If you're religious and you want to join, they would be happy to have you. But the basic idea here and what they do, and they do a lot of great work, is trying to let people have the freedom of conscience. They can choose or to choose not to have a religion, and the government should have nothing to do with it. And the government should have nothing to do with creating laws that impose one religious view on the religious views of others. And I can only dream or fantasize that at some point, as the white nationalist religious right gets a few more things passed, that other people of different religions will look at that and say, "No, wait a minute. I'm all for America being religious, as long as it's my religion. Well, it's not your religion. And if you want to be able to freely practice your religion and do what you want to do, you need to keep religion out of your fucking government. So go join Americans United. And of course, stay tuned and listen for this. And right before that, of course, I will have a little segment, only a few minutes, on non-transparent ETFs. Just another fun way for the industry to take money out of your pocket and put it in theirs. And so we're going to take a quick little break, do the Investing Skeptically segment, have the interview, and then I've got a couple other thoughts about a recent phone call I had with someone with questions at the end of the show. And of course, if you have show ideas, questions, you can send me an email, phil@polarisfinancialplanning.com. And hang on, and we'll be right back.
My mum only lied to me about one thing. She said there was a God, and but that's because when you're a working class mum, Jesus is like an unpaid babysitter. Do you know what I mean? It's just sort of like, she wants you to be good. You know, the best of working class mum where I grew up, she wasn't hoping I'd be a doctor or a lawyer. She hoped I wouldn't be stabbed to death in a barroom fight, you know. So the best thing to do is, well, if he's God-fearing, then he'd be good. It's a good rule of thumb because, you know, I went to Sunday school from about the age of 4 till 8. There was just great teachings of Jesus. I loved Jesus. He was my superhero. He really was. God was magic, right? But Jesus was just a man. And what I loved about Jesus was he was kind. And he was brave, and I thought he was amazing. And I thought he was brilliant, like just a brilliant guy, you know. So I was about 8, and my brother must have been 19. He came in once, and I was doing something from the Bible, and I said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Oh, drawing Jesus." And he went, "Who was Jesus?" I said, "Well, he was the Son of God." He went, "Why do you believe in God?" Right? And my mum went, "Bob, shut up." And I knew she had something to hide. And he was telling the truth. And I knew from body language. And then I worked it out, and I was an atheist in an hour.
In an hour?
Yeah.
The Phil Ferguson Show is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Nothing said on the show should be interpreted as personalized investment advice. Investments should be based on your personal situation, and you, of course, should consult with your financial advisor or tax professional before taking any actions.
You're listening to The Phil Ferguson Show.
I've got a fun little topic for you that we haven't discussed before. Non-transparent ETFs. Yes, that's right, non-transparent. That alone should be all you need to know to not use them. I don't have any data on these because they're pretty much brand new, but it's something that the industry has fought for a long time, and the regulators finally said, okay, you can do it. And this, of course, is one of those things where regulators allow new stupid shit to occur, but then make rules that block you from doing things that aren't stupid. Whatever. It's just the world that we live in. We have to work around it best we can. I have talked in the past about proprietary funds and how recent regulations have allowed 401ks and other ERISA type accounts, 403b, TSP, stuff like that. They can use proprietary mutual funds. And what I mean by proprietary mutual funds, it might say John Hancock Fund of America investment portfolio, and they'll give you the results, and they can probably give you some documents and disclosure documents telling you what they do and what their limits are, but it's not publicly traded. You can't just pull up and see the number on Morningstar of how it's doing. And if you can, it's the number that's reported by the fund itself. And you can't really sell the shares or move the shares over to another account because the broker or the custodian that you're going to use probably won't be able to hold it, so it has to be liquidated. And if it's from a tax special treatment qualified account, it'll be okay. But it's one of those things that you can't really see what's inside of it. So
It's kind of inside of a black box, and they just give you the numbers that they give you, and that's that. Well, the newer version of that is ETFs that are allowed to do the same kind of thing. So an ETF can invest in whatever is legally permissible to invest inside of an ETF, which is a lot of different things, I'm telling you. And the manager of this ETF can change philosophies, they can change styles, they can change strategies, and then, daily they have to calculate the value. Actually, it would be hourly. No, in real time for an ETF. They calculate the value, but you have no knowledge or control over what they invest in. You could have an ETF that has just growth fund name, and they're investing in Bitcoin. You could have one that's investing in oil or a mix of crazy things. You have no idea. You have absolutely no way of knowing what you actually are invested in. If you want to do that, go for it. Good luck to you. It's not something that I'm interested in. I want to know what I'm invested in. I want to know what portion is domestic versus international as far as stocks and for bonds. I want to know how much is bonds versus stocks. I want to know how much is short-term bonds and long-term bonds. I want to know how much is government bonds versus corporate bonds. I want to be able to see in detail what I have in every different way I can think about it. I like that. Maybe you don't want that. You don't need that. But what this can lead to, and we talked about this in a previous episode, is that you may have an ETF that trades for dramatically above or below its net asset value because it did really well for some reason that you don't know about. I mean, you just don't know. It's non-transparent. So you have an ETF, when the market goes up 10 and this ETF goes up 45%, does the money rush in? Of course the money rushes in. The money rushes in because everyone loves a winner. Well, why did it win? You don't know. That's the inherent part of being fucking non-transparent. So if it made all this money, you want to buy it, and you're willing to pay more than its net asset value, which you don't even know what it's invested in. And so you end up buying an ETF on a markup. Well, not a markup, but at a price, at a traded price on the market, higher than what it's actually worth. That is contrary to a lot of reasonable, logical things that you might want to do as an investor. And of course, if the ETF is doing poorly, and you have no idea why it's doing poorly, you probably just want to sell it. Well, guess what? Everyone else is trying to sell it at the very same time you've decided that it's a bad investment, and it trades for below the net asset value. So not only did you lose money for unknown reasons, but now you lose even more money for known reasons because the supply is outstripping the demand because no one wants this fund anymore. So it's just another example of the wackiness that is out there. It's, of course, something that I'm telling you not to invest in. And sometimes I feel like I give really boring investment advice. Stick to what you know. There's plenty of ways to make money that I don't know about, but I stick to what I know. You should do the same. Stick to what you know. If you only really basically understand stocks and bonds like I do, well, that's what you invest in. If you understand real estate, you can go do that. I don't really talk about the pros and cons of real estate investing much because it's outside of my area of expertise. But these non-transparent ETFs are inside of my area of expertise. Don't do it. If they're offered in your 401k or 403b, don't do it. I also recommend that you avoid proprietary funds. And one quick way to do that is inside of your employer plan, you should see a symbol, 3 to 4 to 5 digits, like VVIAX as an example, as the Vanguard Large Cap Value Fund. And you can go look up that fund from an outside source and not be dependent on Vanguard in this case, telling you how much it's worth. You want to be able to cross-reference these things and see if you can get information from another source. Proprietary mutual funds do not have that. Non-transparent ETFs, it's a little slightly different problem, but it's the same kind of thing. You're relying on them reporting what the net asset value is, but then you add on this extra layer where you may pay more than the fair market price or less than the fair market price to get in or out. And of course, whoever is running this non-transparent ETF can create new shares, as we discussed about recently. They can create new shares to sell out into the market above the net asset value of the things owned within the ETF. And it's a really clever way for people to make money, a lot of money legally, off of, I guess, your ignorance. Yeah, I mean, it's not that you're stupid. You're just ignorant. You don't know what they're doing. You don't know why they're doing it. But if someone wants to run up the price on a specific ETF, the company that created and manages and runs that ETF not only gets their ongoing overhead expense ratio, but they can create more shares and sell them on the market while the price is above the net asset value. So I thought you might like that, a little bit of knowledge on non-transparent ETFs.
Pace e lunga vita.
Lunga vita e prosperità.
You're listening to The Phil Ferguson Show.
All right, everybody. I know you've been itching. You can't hardly wait. We are finally at that moment where we are going to talk to Rachel Lazar. Rachel, how are you today?
I am well. It's nice to be with you and all of your listeners.
You're very, very kind. Now, you have a job. What are you, like the czar, king, queen at Americans United for the separation of church and state?
I am kind of that. It's really cool and really an honor, actually. I'm the first female and the first non-Christian, I'm Jewish, president of Americans United, and it's 75 years.
Now, was it directly before you? It wasn't Barry Lynn. Did I miss somebody?
No, it was. It
Okay.
was the famous Reverend Barry Lynn,
Yes.
who I said famously, I couldn't be like even in a skirt if I tried. He is a wonderful United Church of Christ pastor who was the czar of Americans United for 25 years of his life.
Indeed. He is I'll call him a friend of the show. He's been on a couple times, and
Awesome.
I've met him in person multiple times, but I'm so unfortunate I haven't met you in person yet.
Yeah, well, let's make that happen.
There you go. And I just looked on the website just to get the correct title. You're president and CEO.
True. That is true.
Does that come with double the pay?
No, but that's okay because it's, just the rewards of doing right by my country.
Doing
So it
right
feels pretty good
by
every
your
day.
country. So you did mention Jewish.
Mm-hmm.
What kind? Is that even a question one can ask? Does
Sure.
that
I'm a
matter?
Reform Jew,
Okay.
which is what the majority of American Jews are, which means kind of the most lax.
So you would be allowed in the same room with other
very much so.
Jewish citizens, followers, people.
Yes, I could, and I can pray next to men.
And you don't have
as
to
well.
be in the back behind the curtain or anything.
No, I don't, which is a requirement of my faith. But yeah, no, I got into the Jewish world of work, a professional Jew, by accident when I was recruited to be the deputy director of the Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism by the famous Rabbi David Saperstein here in Washington, where I did a lot of interfaith organizing on behalf of the social justice arm of the Reform Jewish
Sure.
movement. But I also have worked with white evangelical Christians when I was at a think tank called Third Way, which is a great think tank that specializes in reaching moderates and bringing them into the progressive fold. I did a project called Come Let Us Reason Together, which brought together progressives with white evangelical Christians to find shared values on abortion and LGBTQ equality. And we could do a whole show on that, but that's not, I don't think, what I'm here to talk about.
Absolutely not, but we could. I cover all of those subjects. I don't know how familiar you are with the show, but I talk about money, religion, and politics, the three things you should not discuss with your family.
Love it.
So-
I'm here for it.
Absolutely. And I know that apparently you just hired away one of my good friends, Andrew And of course, now I said good friend, and then I don't even know how to say his last
Andrew
name.
Seidel.
Thank you.
So did. It's a coup for Americans United, and
Yeah.
we love our friends at Freedom from Religion Foundation. And Andrew has become our vice president for communications, which is interesting. He's a lawyer by training, but feels not wrongly that we're in a time period in this country where it's at least as important to be growing the visibility of church state separation and the movement
Absolutely.
of people who are there to support it, because we cannot afford to take the separation of religion and government for granted anymore. It is a pillar of our democracy,
Yes.
as I think was evidenced at the insurrection,
Yeah.
where we saw the Christian flags parading onto the Senate floor, and we know from a big report that Andrew Seidel actually was part of, that Christian nationalists played a huge role in fueling the insurrection. So we know that church-state separation is important to so many issues that everybody cares about: LGBTQ equality, reproductive freedom, racial justice, voting rights, fair elections, but also to democracy itself. And we hope that everybody, this is the beginning of my flacking, you said I could. We hope that everybody listening to this show goes to au.org and joins us, because we absolutely need your support. We're the only nonprofit dedicated solely to protecting the separation of religion and government.
Well,
and we're busy.
I know I told you that I expected you to be shamelessly self-promotional. Congratulations. You've achieved that. Achievement unlocked.
I'm not done.
No.
I'm not done. I'm just starting.
There's always more, and that's fantastic. I was just scrolling through the staff. When did the staff get so big? Did I miss that? Is this new, or has it just been gradually growing while I wasn't paying attention?
I mean, we've been gradually growing, and we've grown as well since I arrived at Americans United, which is great. People are waking up increasingly to how important separation of religion and government is. It's something that a lot of people used to take for granted, and too many people still do, as
Yes.
in, wasn't that something that we took care of in the late 1700s, and it's part of the First Amendment, and those old guys who, some of us have mixed feelings about even, were our founders, and they took care of it, right? It's done. What is it anyway, right? That's what we found in our polling. A lot of people aren't even clear on how it connects to reproductive rights and LGBTQ equality and even racial justice.
Well, I mean, of course, the original version of the Constitution, before it was modified a couple of times, you were not allowed to vote.
Right. That is true. That is true. And so the Constitution has had and has flaws, but they got this right.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, This is something the founders really understood. And by the way, Thomas Jefferson, who was really the foundation of the first 16 words in the First Amendment that protect religious freedom through his Virginia statute for religious freedom that he put together. He was famous for talking about how religious freedom was for Christians and Jews and Hindus and Mohammedans and infidels of every faith. I mean, imagine those words being uttered in the 1700s in America. That was radical.
I'm waiting for someone
right.
to stand up in Congress and say, if it does not pick my pocket or break my leg, everything's fine, but just keep it out of the laws. A little quirky thing. I went into a grocery store here in Illinois at 11:45 a.m. one Sunday and was buying alcohol for a 4th of July party or something years ago. And they said, we can't sell that to you. And I said, why not? And they said, there's no liquor sales before noon on Sunday.
Yes.
And of course, it's just the poor cashier that I'm talking to here. And I said, well, when does before noon start? And they're like, what? I mean, clearly 11:45 a.m. is before noon. Is 2 a.m. before noon? Is 6 p.m. Saturday night before noon? When does before noon start?
So funny. Today, that may be offensive, and I get it, but we are talking about healthcare access. We are talking about the right to work for a federal contractor, which employ about 1/5 of all Americans. We are talking about being able to foster a kid in need of a loving home. These are the types of areas of life that are all being put at risk because there is a movement that is emboldened today that is trying to undermine the separation of religion and government and turn the sacred right of religious privilege into of religious freedom. Whoops. Freudian slip. Into a form of religious privilege. And it's impacting us in very serious ways. Really, all those ways that I talked about. Under the Trump administration, there were rules that would allow everyone associated with the healthcare system to refuse healthcare based on their religious beliefs. There were rules that would allow federal contractors to deny employment if you didn't pass their religious litmus test. Still in the books, by the way. Working on it. And then, we've got all these cases on behalf of foster parents. Sorry, Phil. Go ahead.
It's all good.
I'm getting into it.
So I'm assuming that a position of Americans United, which you represent, and of course, if you have opinions different than that of the organization, just let me know. But if someone feels like they can't provide service to someone of a different religion or who've made different sexual choices, I'm thinking particularly of a pharmacist, I'm kind of thinking that's a fireable offense if you can't serve the public at large and do your job. And it's fine. If you don't want to do that, quit. What do you think?
Right. Absolutely. Look, there are laws on the books in many states that provide religious exemptions, right? And what we would say is religious exemptions should not license harm to others in the name of religion. That religious exemptions that allow a Muslim to wear her headdress into the jury room where there aren't head coverings allowed, those are fine. Those don't do harm to anyone. But when you are licensing harm to others in the name of religion as the state, you are preferring one religion over others, and our Constitution bans that. That's not okay.
Absolutely.
So harm to others, that's our line that we draw.
And I know, what would you consider Americans United? It would be non-sectarian, but not secular? Or
so
both?
We are a secular group, actually. It's an interesting question. Sometimes people think of us as a religious group. And the truth is we do bring together religious and non-religious Americans. Every day we fight in the courts, in Congress and state legislatures, and in the public square. And we have a new tagline. This is what we fight for.
Talk to me.
Freedom without favor, equality without exception. Because at heart, what religious freedom protects is our right to live as ourselves and believe as we choose.
Absolutely. I love it. And so this is a collection of literally anyone who shares those values, just alliterated in those couple of phrases. If you share that, it doesn't matter what your faith is, what your religion is, what your color, creed, sexual orientation or choices. None of that matters except for you want to participate in an organization that thinks everyone should have a fair shot, and religion is fine and it's out there. You do your thing. Just do your thing, not in the government.
Absolutely. And go to au.org and join us today if you agree. So we did this poll, and what our poll showed us is 79% of Americans agree with the statement that the law shouldn't allow anyone to use their religious beliefs to harm others. This is vanilla. This is apple pie. This is shared values in America. I was asked, and we'll talk about this case we have before the Supreme Court, but I was asked, where is common ground, on your issue? Shouldn't we be striving to find common ground? Common ground is drawing the line at the state authorizing the use of religion to harm others. Otherwise, imagine every person would be their own island, as a conservative justice once said. And we would be all operating in this territory where we could have an exemption to anything that we don't like just because of our religion that would authorize discrimination. That's not the America that we all want to live in, especially the pluralistic, diverse America that our Constitution has intentionally ushered in.
I like it. Now, just for the listeners, again, it's au.org. And at least if my browser is any representation, at the very top right, there's a big red button that says donate.
Thank you. We need it.
Yeah,
listen, we need it. Our opponents are so well funded.
But it's like 100 to 1, 1,000 to 1. It's absolutely staggering.
Yeah, it really is. In fact, if you look at the who's who of who submitted briefs to the court on the side of Coach Kennedy in this Kennedy v. Bremerton case that we're fighting,
Yeah.
it is a who's who of extremists in this country worth, and we added it up, 50 organizations worth over $1 billion annual revenue.
Okay.
We are fighting a shadowy network of big money, big dollars.
Well, I mean, there's the shadowy part, and then there's the other part that's not even shadowy. It's just out there and loud.
That's true.
And, it's one of those things like tangentially related to what I do with business. There's a lot of companies that make money ripping people off, but who gets paid to explain to you how things work? And it's kind of like this, the really convinced and the really devoted kick in a lot of money, and the people who just want everyone to get along, they don't kick in a lot of money. So this is your chance, listener, to go kick in a lot of money. Now, you mentioned Kennedy v. Bremerton. Let's get into that. Wherever you want to go, you want to talk about where it is now, you want to talk about how it got started, you lead.
Well, this is a case about a football coach who violated the religious freedom of students. And he did that by pressuring them to pray with him at the 50-yard line directly following games at the time that the team huddle usually occurs.
Yeah, now you say pressure. We're not talking about like a double Nelson or a wedgie or anything, right? It's a social
Let's talk
thing.
about that.
Yeah.
That's a great question, Phil, and that's really important part of this case because the other side, Coach Kennedy and his lawyers and the shadowy network behind his lawyers are painting what the lower courts called a deceitful narrative, right? They're claiming this is just a coach that wanted to pray in a private and solitary manner.
On the 50-yard line.
On the 50-yard line directly following games. And what we say is this guy prayed when he was on official duty representing the state, right? He works for a public school at a time and place where the team gathers, where there's an expectation that the team huddle around the coach. And if you look at any pictures, just look it up or follow us on Twitter at Americans United, and you can scroll and see pictures of tons of students taking a knee, surrounding the coach, holding the helmet up in the air, saying what isn't at all a private and solitary prayer. So that's what's important to understand about this case, that it's being set up on false premises, and it's a hypothetical question, really, before the court. So that's
it's interesting. If he just wanted to do his own prayer, and that's the location he wanted to do it, I'll take him for his word. Show us all of the times that he went to the field and prayed when there wasn't a game.
There you go. Also,
yeah,
I love this line. I was speaking to an Episcopal bishop from the area where the case is taking place, and I love what he said to me. He said, people who come to me and say that they have to pray at the 50-yard line right there and then, they say to me they have to do it so God can hear them. And what I say back to them is, then your vision of God isn't big enough.
Yeah, your God's
God
pretty
can
freaking
hear you
weak.
anywhere. Your God's small.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things, and I don't know about Jewish traditions very much, but I know in the Bible, I wish I had looked up the verse. There's something about instructions of where and when to pray, and at home and in the closet. Are you familiar with that?
Jesus has some words, actually, that I am familiar with, where he admonishes against praying in an ostentatious way. I think it's in Matthew.
Yeah, don't be like the Pharisees or something like that.
Exactly.
It's bad magic.
That's right. And I actually, an American Baptist reverend from the Bremerton area actually cited that provision when he met me at the football field at the Bremerton football field and spoke to a lot of media from a passionate place about this, because interestingly, the Baptists remember a time, and this guy's an American Baptist leader.
Yes.
His name is Doug Aviles Bernal. He's a wonderful reverend, and he spoke to Baptists remembering a time where Baptists were the religious minority and shunned. And so Baptists have church-state separation as an important part of their denomination. They are outspoken. In fact, we partner all the time with the Baptist Joint Committee for Religious Liberty because they feel so strongly, like a lot of our founders of Americans United for Separation of Church and State did, that separating religion and government protects religion as much as it protects everybody's religious freedom.
Absolutely. I did find the line here, Matthew 6:6, forgive my diversion here for a moment.
Yes.
When thou prayest, enter into thy closet, and when thou hast shut thy door, that's old English, fancy, pray to the Father which is in secret, and thy Father which seeth in secret shall reward thee openly. And of course, I just, to keep it short, but the sentence before says don't do it on the street corner. Don't do it for show, because you're a hypocrite, and that's not how it works. And so I love to tell that to people who are, praying before a council or anything else. So, but you've got a coach. I don't know if he's the coach, but you have a coach praying at the 50-yard line. There's this inherent social pressure, often in places in America. And so, of course, when someone brings it up as a concern to the school immediately goes in and tells them to stop, and it's finished, right? That takes care of it.
So the school actually tells him to stop, but importantly offers him some alternative places to pray and offers to meet with him to discuss finding solutions. That's in some letters from Superintendent Lavelle, a great guy who I met when I was in Bremerton. And they actually made this offer repeatedly in letters to Coach Kennedy. In fact, in the legal record, he even says that he would have been fine with some of their alternatives, but he ends up sending a letter, his lawyers do, 2 days before the homecoming game, saying, nope, I only want to pray at the 50-yard line immediately following games such that students can join me.
So why is he not just fired then?
So I don't know the answer to that, actually,
Fair
Phil.
enough.
What I can
you don't
tell you
represent
is
the
that
school.
he's put on soon thereafter. I think what happens is, I think what I could say is that the school is really trying to work with him, genuinely. And the game happens, but I think the game was, quite a precipitator of that action. They actually put him on paid administrative leave, just for the record. They didn't even fire him, and then he didn't reapply for the job. Those are the facts of the case.
Yeah.
But at that homecoming game, there was such a spectacle. He had gone public in the paper and, kind of made a big thing of it, and the state representative joined him on the field, and a crowd rushed the field, and they toppled cheerleaders and band players, and it was so unsafe feeling. You mentioned, I don't even know whether he's the only coach, so he is the assistant varsity coach. The head varsity coach said that he was worried that he would be shot from people in the stand. That's how unsafe it got. So now
he'd be shot. Why would he be shot? Just because everybody has a gun?
Because it was so divisive and heated.
Oh, I see.
Right, that it was such a crazy moment, on this issue, and these kind of extremists were taking over the school in this small town in Bremerton.
So
that's why.
Sometimes religion can cause a divide. Is that?
I wonder if that's part of the reason why we have church-state separation in this country. In fact, it is.
Things that make you go, As the
Just look around the world.
Yeah, CNC Music Factory, I think that was. Things that make you go, So,
Exactly.
so the coach, I guess, didn't get fired, got put on leave, didn't reapply for his job. Is that the correct interpretation, correct way to say it?
That is the correct way to say it.
So he didn't get
not.
fired. He didn't quit. His contract, his tenure ended, and everybody just kind of was like, so where's the coach now? Is he's still involved in the case, right?
So he sued, and really unfortunately, the case has made it all the way up to the Supreme Court. It never should have made it there. As I said, there's what the Ninth Circuit judge who said it was a deceitful narrative is actually a George W. Bush appointee, for the record.
Yeah.
He used such strong words. He called it false. He said, beware of the siren song of a deceitful narrative. Guys called Judge Milan Smith Jr. And he said that it should have never made it to the Supreme Court. There's not even any divide in the lower courts. The law is so clear and well established in this space that we get violation reports all throughout the year from schools that are violating. But all that we need to do, even in conservative places, generally speaking, is write them a legal demand letter saying, stop, this is what the law says. And they do, because the law is that well established and clear that that's not okay.
Yeah, I know. Not related specifically to religion per se, and I'll keep it short because it's your interview, but you're on my show. So when my daughter was a freshman in high school and she was doing basketball cheerleading, after the basketball game was over, I found my daughter and I said, okay, it's over. Let's go home. And she says, no, I can't. We all have to clean up the the gymnasium. And I said, who's we? And she said, the cheerleaders. And I go, what do you mean by clean up? And she's like, all the spilled popcorn, all the drinks, all the trash. We have to go through all the bleachers and under the bleachers and around the entire gymnasium and pick it all up.
I'll just say things that make you go,
Yeah. And she talked to the coaches about it. I talked to the coaches about it, and it rapidly jumped up to the principal of the school. And he said that there was nothing wrong with it, that the girls do all the cleaning. And I went and visited him first thing, 7:30 on a Monday morning. And then later that day, he got a registered letter. He got a phone call from another parent, and then the fourth parent had a letter from their attorney. And we had this all orchestrated to come at the same day. And the next day, apparently after meeting with legal counsel,
wow,
and involving the board and the superintendent of the district, he sent out an email that said they were going to discontinue the practice.
Yes.
But it was perfectly fine and okay. They're just going to stop doing it. And I was like, really? You still think it's okay?
Well,
whatever.
Their actions spoke louder than their words, right? And in fact, you bringing up parents speaking out reminds me to say
Yes.
to the listeners that in this case, there's nothing hypothetical about the harm to the religious freedom of the students that were pressured to pray. Parents came forward in the legal record and said, my son told me that he felt pressured to pray to play. My son told me that he felt pressured to pray to feel like he was part of the team. My son felt awkward. This is all in the record.
Yeah. I agree. And I'll expand on that. The idea that a leader, a teacher, or a coach, especially anything to do with sports, it's all team. It's team building. It's working together. If you are the odd one out, you're the one not joining the prayer. What are you going to be in the game, or are you going to be on the bench? Do you even worry about that? Of course you should worry about that as a player, because not because you prayed or didn't pray, you're not part of the team.
That's it. And actually, Chris Kluwe, who was a former NFL football player.
I know him, yes.
Okay, he has an op-ed in the Minnesota Star Tribune today about how this is unacceptable and how coaches don't even get the most from their players if they don't make them feel a part of the team family.
Yeah.
You know, I was so happy to see him speaking up in this case. It's amazing, but it's real. He is speaking from the perspective of a former football player for the NFL and as a coach today.
Absolutely.
And I think that, talking about that pressure, we actually had some psychologists who wrote into the court in a friend of the court brief to say teenagers are so beholden to authority of their teachers and their coaches. They're fearful. Their coaches hold benefits that they desperately want, from playtime to college scholarships. And peer pressure matters so much. So when their coaches are pressuring folks to join, and even some of their peers do, that adds a whole nother layer of pressure. I mean, who doesn't remember being a teenager and feeling that idolization of their coach if they played sports, or their teachers wanting to please them, and also peer pressure, right? By the way, I grew up in Chicago. And I played field hockey, and I remember it very well. So I think it's so important not to be deceived by this idea that he wasn't really pressuring the players to join him. Here's another fact, Phil.
Yeah.
When he didn't pray, none of the students did. Right?
Yeah. I mean, left on their own, often students can be very smart and intelligent and sensitive to those around them, but that dynamic very quickly changes in the right scenarios. And this not just plays out with teachers and coaches, but in politics, in business. When you have a position of authority, you have to be very, very careful with what you do or recommend or suggest, because it's not an even playing field. It's not two random people who get together and one says you must do this and the other one says fuck off. If your membership on the team, or your scholarship, or your grades, or your career might be on the line, that's not equal power. It's wildly divergent strengths.
Thank you. Yes, power. Thank you for bringing that into this conversation. I think that's so important. And by the way, teachers have and coaches have an inordinate amount of power, which justices have recognized and given special care to protect the religious freedom of students, understanding that, you know, over time. Here, I think the other thing that's so dangerous about this case is there's a bigger crusade in this country by religious extremists and their lawmaker allies to turn religious freedom into the right to impose your one narrow religion on everyone else. And think about that in the context of this case, that here we have a public official, a football coach, who's using, in your words, Phil, the power of the state to impose his religion on teenagers. That is so unacceptable, and it sets such a dangerous precedent for, from here on out, for what has been a pillar of our democracy.
Yeah, I'm horrified at even the thought that the Supreme Court took the case, first of all, because they don't have to. Hopefully everyone knows that who's listening. But they chose to take the case because they think there's something valuable to discuss here. But if they say that this is not a problem, this changes everything. And it changes a lot and powerfully and wrongly, in my opinion. But how do you think it's going to go?
Well,
how scared should we be?
I mean, it is as scary as you say. I mean, I think it opens the door that religious extremists can kick in to prayer for students K through 12 all around the country. Yeah, because our public schools.
If the Supreme Court says it's okay for the coach to do this, then why wouldn't it be okay for the teacher at the beginning of class, at the end of class?
That's it. To read the Lord's Prayer out loud, quote, to herself.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
The
students in the classroom.
The students aren't involved. I'm just reading this out loud, and it doesn't affect your grade at all. I'm not going to give you 5 extra credit points for praying along with me. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And here we go.
That's it. So you were saying, what do I think is going to happen, right?
Yeah.
Read the tea leaves. Well, here's the deal. Like, what should happen is the court should find that the facts are different from the facts that were presented. I mean, this is a case where usually there's not a factual dispute by the time you make it to the Supreme Court, but where the court has so far in the question that they granted cert, it's called, that they took the case on, has bought in so far to these false facts that it's a coach that wants to have the right to private and solitary prayer. So the court should be throwing the case out. There's another argument that the court should be throwing the case out on the grounds that the coach moved to Florida 2 years ago. We recently found out that he considers himself a citizen of Florida. He owns a home in Florida. He votes in Florida. He calls himself a Floridian on Facebook. And the idea that he would move back to accept a $5,300 a year job as an assistant coach that has year-round duties just doesn't seem plausible.
Well, and it's in my experience, not necessarily Americans United, but more atheistic-y organizations. Often their attempts to pursue a legal resolution are thrown out because they don't have standing. Well, this guy doesn't even live in the state, and he's not a teacher, and it's already been ruled on. Why? Because he can.
Well, and we actually did file a motion. I think it's called a mootness statement or something like that before the court, and they haven't ruled on it yet. And we're not necessarily optimistic that they will find this moot, but they should. And because the facts of the case and the laws of our country are so clear, and so many Americans are with us, religious and non-religious, the court should absolutely find this as an occasion to assert the importance of schools being able to control their employees' speech, especially where safety concerns arise and where the religious freedom of students is at risk and where it's proven to be, right, like we saw in this case. And that would be an amazing thing if they did. And they could also, I think, rectify some of their image as being purely political by doing that, right? And to go with the stare decisis, which is with the precedent that exists, and affirm it. That would be, I think, restorative of their reputation in the minds of too many Americans right now who are having a hard time believing in our Supreme Court as like a fair judicial body, which is really unfortunate for our democracy. And I don't want that. And I don't think any of us should want that.
Yeah, I think they've already tainted themselves by accepting the case, because it was clearly decided, and I don't think there's really anything left to discuss from a court perspective. I think we have a lot to talk about. We have friends and family that have a lot to talk about, and I'm just going to go back to this donation thing. Forgive me for promoting your group so much. Often I'm providing access and a voice to atheistic, humanistic groups and telling people to go join. But if you are a listener and you've never really felt comfortable going that far over to the atheistic side, Americans United is probably a great freaking place for you to throw some money, because this is that middle approach. And I think from my perspective, we need all approaches. We need to work all together on the things we agree with. And like you said, the vast majority of Americans want religion out of politics. They don't want laws that tell them what they can and can't do because someone else's religion says so. If your religion says you shouldn't do something and you follow that religion, then don't fucking do it. That's all.
Thank you.
That's all it takes.
I like that. The non-religious people love us too at Americans United.
Oh,
and one of the
absolutely.
reasons that they love us is that we bring religious voices to the table who are wonderful.
Yes.
And we have a huge number of clergy and religious voices with us who and denominations. Every day we do it in our legal briefs, in our letters to Capitol Hill, and these religious voices speak up on behalf of the rights of non-religious Americans, on behalf of their religious minority neighbors, and in the name of their own interests, like the American Baptist I was telling you about. I also wanted to say, Phil, I didn't get this in earlier because this is remarkable.
Talk to me.
There is a large group of local clergy from Bremerton who are weighing in this case. They have signed a brief to the court, and a group of them are flying in to speak with me on the steps of the Supreme Court on the morning of oral argument.
Oh, nice.
And they are Bremerton area clergy. They are Episcopal priests and Methodist pastors and an American Baptist pastor and rabbis. And I should say this, sorry, I'm having a hard time saying this concept. The only Bremerton area clergy who are weighing in at all to the Supreme Court in this case are weighing in on the side of Bremerton School District, not the coach.
Well, and it's a funny thing because these religious leaders know it's really easy for a Jewish leader or a Muslim leader to see that this is a problem. But it's also a problem for the vast majority of people who are Christian, because sure, you want to fight for your Christian right to party. But as soon as that is granted, it's no longer Christians versus everybody else. It's all the Christians versus all the other Christians to decide what type of Christian. And I know from my experience living in Arkansas that they specifically picked out several sects of religion, Catholicism, and you've mentioned Methodists and some Baptists and the Anglicans and the Episcopalians. I've actually heard people tell me that those aren't actually Christians.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
It never ends. It's a division after division after division. So if that's what you want to do in your free time, in your personal life, do whatever you want to do. Matter of fact, if everybody did that, I'd have to find a second hobby instead of fighting religion. If religion just did its thing and left me out of it.
Yeah. And I think that truly and deeply religious people who don't have political agendas but are concerned about their religion and religious denominations support the separation of religion and government.
Absolutely. Now, we were going to talk at least 20 minutes, and it's pushing 40. And I'm in no hurry to go anywhere, but I do want to check and respect your time. Before we wrap up, is there anything about the case, about American United's? What else would you like to talk about?
I would just like to say that if you care about reproductive freedom, if you care about LGBTQ equality, if you care about racial justice, if you care about religious minorities and the rights of the non-religious, and if you care about our democracy, you absolutely should be joining Americans United at AU.org today and being part of our movement and getting your friends to join too. That we cannot take church-state separation for granted anymore in this country. Every day we are fighting bills that license discrimination in the name of religion all across the country, Bible bills in classrooms. And it's a very serious situation right now. So I would just like to leave your listeners by pleading with them to become part of our movement, that it's worth the investment, because we have a serious threat right now to really a foundational principle that's supposed to be protected in our Constitution. Religious freedom is supposed to be a shield that's protecting all of us, but it's being turned into a sword, and we cannot allow that.
Absolutely. And again, listeners, it's real simple. au.org. It's pretty freaking short website. Donate button there, and information about chapters and the staff and the board of trustees. And on the front page, of course, you can get the breaking news for the legal case Kennedy versus Bremerton. And unfortunately, as I warned you in advance, well, they probably won't have decided by the time this show goes out, but they'll be hearing arguments before this show is published. You can go to that website and follow up and see where things are and if there's a ruling yet. That all sound right?
Absolutely. That sounds great. And Phil, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to have this time with you, and I really appreciate you showcasing this issue for your listeners.
It is not a problem. And of course, everybody, we've been talking to Rachel Lazar, President and CEO of Americans United for the Separation of Church and State. And once again, Rachel, thank you for spending time with us.
It was my pleasure. Oh, and they can follow me on Twitter too.
Yes, what's that?
At Rachel K. Laser, Laser, like the laser beam. Rachel K. Laser. Oh, Rachel, no A there.
Rachel. And again, thank you so much. We'll talk to you at another time.
Thanks again, Phil. Take care, everyone.
As a scientist, do you believe in God?
So, in the West, there's 2/3 of scientists pray to a personal God on the expectation it will intervene in their day's affairs. But I can tell you this, productive scientists do not bring their Bible, their scripture, their holy books into the lab because they do not mix there. So they draw a line in the sand and they do one in one place, then they worship on the weekend, Saturday or Sunday, whatever is your religious tradition, there. So to ask whether they can coexist, the answer is empirically yes.
I didn't ask that. I asked, do you believe in God?
Every description of God that I've heard holds God to be all-powerful, very typical, and all good. And then I look around and I see a tsunami that killed 250,000 people in Indonesia, an earthquake that killed 250,000 people in Haiti, and I see earthquakes and tornadoes and disease, childhood leukemia, and I see all of this and I say, I do not see evidence of both of those being true simultaneously. If there is a God, the God is either not all-powerful or not all good. Can't be both.
Good answer. It's my question of the year.
So I'm. If you have good evidence, I'm good for it. But I'm evidence-driven.
You need evidence.
More
You're a
than
scientist.
I'm faith-driven.
Yeah. Well, it's good to know.
And by the way, to be faith-driven is one thing, but to be faith-driven and try to create legislation on that affects other people who don't share your faith, that's the beginnings of a theocracy. And we have evidence of what that is in the past. And our founding fathers specifically founded this country to prevent that from happening.
The Phil Ferguson Show is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Nothing said on the show should be interpreted as personalized investment advice. Investments should be based on your personal situation, and you, of course, should consult with your financial advisor or tax professional before taking any actions. Hopefully you've enjoyed the show so far. I do have a couple of follow-up thoughts on my discussion of Italy at the beginning. About halfway through our trip, I got what I thought, what I hoped, was a cold. A little sinus infection, the pressure above and below your eyes, and congestion, and went into una farmacia, pharmacies, which are great in Italy. Oh my God. And I just walk in,
and I explained to them, and it really does help that I know the language, but I explained it to them what I wanted, and I ended up buying, I don't know even what do you call it in English, a albuterol, the little thing that you put in your mouth, like if you have asthma, and you, I don't know. That's the universal sound for albuterol, I guess. But the price for that over the counter, $4. Well, €4. Absolutely amazing stuff. And that helped me at least prevent what I thought was just a sinus infection turning into bronchitis. I also, at a different pharmacy on a different day, bought a saline spray to try to break up all the mucus and stuff compacted up in my face. I know, right? Exactly what you wanted to hear from a podcast. It used to be in the past, in my 20s, I would get bronchitis almost every year. And one day, just a nurse who was really smart and apparently thought of something that the doctor didn't think of said, have you ever thought of using saline spray to break up the congested material before it becomes infected and then drips down into your lungs? I was like, no, I hadn't. So, but after a couple of days, I really wasn't feeling much better. And so I kind of played it off as allergies, hoping that it was not COVID. And we ended up with a driver that took us, I think at this point, from say Lucca to Florence, because we spent the last several days of our trip in Florence. And I just kind of stayed quiet because you may hear it. I still have some congestion now, and a little bit of a raspy voice, which might actually be good for the podcast. But near the end of this ride, after telling our driver that I had allergies, I ended up with a coughing fit. And when I'm saying coughing, I mean, I was concerned I was going to wet myself kind of coughing. And I don't know if the mask was helping me or hurting me, because I had a couple of days of stubble on the face, and I think the stubble was shredding the mask from the inside, and I think I was breathing in little shredded mask fibers. But I was coughing so hard, I ended up crying. I mean, there's tears coming out of my eyes, and we're only a couple of miles from our destination, and the driver says, how are your allergies, sir, or something like that. And I'm pretty sure he was on to me that I didn't just have allergies anymore. So as soon as we got into our room, well, thankfully we brought a couple of extra tests to test for COVID. And I went through the process of testing for COVID, and it came up negative, which I think I'm mostly happy about that. I don't think I want COVID. Kind of part of me in my brain says, get it and get it over with. But I think I'd rather not. But so we sent him a message, and we sent the company that we'd contracted with and let them know that I did have a cold and that I just tested and it was negative for COVID. And of course, yes, I would have told him if I was positive. It would have been the right thing to do. Maybe the right thing to do would have been testing before I got in his car. So maybe something for next time to do something a little bit better. But yeah, they have COVID theater over in Italy too, just like we do, where the technical rule is you need a green pass. We don't have that in the United States. They actually for a while had a green pass plus. Apparently Italy, at least currently, has dropped the plus requirement. You need the green pass. And matter of fact, I think only once, maybe twice, at least in Italy, where we asked for our green pass and we whipped out our little CDC white cards and showed them that. And one place I remember in particular, they looked at it and they're like, what is this? This is not a green pass. And I said that this is the CDC card from the United States government. That is the U.S. equivalent of the green pass. And they just looked at it, and they looked at me, and they saw that there's 4 vaccinations, which, who knows? I could have filled out the form myself, right? They're looking for a QRC code on your phone, is what they're looking for. And I give them this card, and they're like, whatever, just come in. But aside from those 1 or 2 times, no one asked. Pretty much every place has a sign on the door still that says you have to have your mask on to enter. And when it's a restaurant, as soon as you sit your ass down on the table, I think everyone, I looked around, everyone takes their masks off, but they all put them on to go to the bathroom or to get to the exit or to pay. And everyone was pretty well behaved. There's, of course, the people in in Italy, just like the United States, that can't figure out that you're supposed to cover your mouth and your nose. So that was interesting. And it seemed to get a little less of a concern the later our trip went. I don't know if that's because we went from smaller towns to bigger towns. The other thing that we noticed, or I noticed, especially in a couple of the really small towns, I had a couple of people that I was talking to in Italian, and I was having a very difficult time because they were more likely to use things from the dialect. Now, we were pretty north, but some of the towns were very small because you can find fun and interesting things in small towns also. One example is to say 600, that's sei is 600, is 6, and cento is 100, seicento, 600. And a young lady I was talking to said, seicento. And I have no idea what she's saying to me. Seicento. And I had to stop her. Said I broke into English. I don't know what you're saying. And she said 600. And I said, say it again. 600. No. In Italian, seicento. And I was like, is that actually Italian? Am I hearing that right? And she's like, oh, I'm sorry. That's the dialect. That's what we say here, but that's not actual Italian. And I'm like, oh, so when I'm traveling, should I say 600 if I want to say 600? And she goes, no, you should not. And she confirmed that she probably shouldn't even be doing it, and that she's being lazy and sloppy and just falling back onto what her family does. But she acknowledged that the correct way to say it is 600 in Italian, but she would say 600. So that was fun. That was part of the interesting thing, is that even if I get to the point where I'm actually fluent in Italian, I may not understand what someone who's talking to me who lives in Italian says. Even in the north, I thought it was a southern problem, but it can also be a very small town problem. But, just the little funs and quirks and interesting things that you learn while you're exploring another country. So it's all good. The other thought real quick is that I recently had a phone conversation with someone that had questions about investments and retirement, and they had a relative that passed away, which is always awful to hear. And of course, I'm not going to share their name, but they met with the agent at the life insurance company and on how to move the money over to their name. And the unfortunate thing is this person had absolutely no idea how any of this stuff works. And they admitted that. I don't mean it as, it's not an insult, maybe a bit of a critique, but it's not an insult. But the unfortunate thing is a lot of people don't really want to know how investments work. It all sounds like a big game or a con or a scam, and it very much sounds that way when you don't know anything about it, which is why I have my recommended book list, which, hang on a second here, I'm just going to go through it real quick. Yeah, sorry for the awkward pause. I had to go pull up the file. Just real quick, number one, The Richest Man in Babylon by George S. Clason. And all four of these books are available in audio, which I love. They're also available in Kindle, which I also love. And they're available in book format, which is also quite cool. The first three books, get them in whatever format is good for you. The fourth one I do recommend in physical paper form, because you need to treat it like a textbook. It does have a lot of information in it. The first one, again, The Richest Man in Babylon. I believe it's also free on YouTube. Warning, trigger warning, whatever you want to call it. This book is over 100 years old, and it is far from woke. It has some things that your ear will consider to be inappropriate, rightfully so, but work through that and just listen for the financial and the investment parts of the book. If someone finds a better introductory book, cool, let me know. You'll also notice with all my books that I am not giving you any new books. I'm not giving you any trendy or hip books. I really like things to have proven to work, and I want to use those things, not some new scheme. And that may be me missing out on opportunities, but whatever. I've been doing this for a long time, and it's worked. Second book, A Random Walk Down Wall Street by Burton G. Malkiel. Oh my God, I wish I knew how to say this guy's name. Malkiel. And this book, like the following books, are often updated every few years. So get something that's a recent version, 7th, 8th, 9th version, because I think this book and the next book both came out in either the late 60s or early 70s. The third book, Winning the Loser's Game, Charles D. Ellis, Winning the Loser's Game. And the fourth book, Common Sense on Mutual Funds, John C. Bogle. I do strongly recommend that you read the books in order. They do build on each other as far as I'm concerned. The first one is about why you should save and invest. The second one is kind of how everything works. The basic vocabulary, what is a mutual fund, what is a bond, what is a stock, how do markets work, all that stuff. Very, very important before you continue on. The third book, Winning the Loser's Game, talks about how to win by not trying to beat everybody, essentially index funds and the value that they have. And again, more information on markets and how they work and the different types of investments. Fourth one, Common Sense on Mutual Funds. It does proceed assuming you know an awful lot about investing. So if you just jump into that fourth book and you don't really know anything about investing, I don't know. You tell me. Someone try it if you want as an experiment. Are you going to understand it? Are you going to get much out of it? I don't think you are. I think it's going to be really hard to digest what's covered in that. The fourth book also has a lot of graphs, statistics, charts, tables, mathematical formulas, historical references, analysis, studies, links to studies. Really, the stuff you want. But you may not be able to process it properly or understand enough of it to get value out of it if you haven't read and learned from the previous three books. Anyway, this person was telling me about what they did with their new friend at the insurance company, and they said that they just put the money in their name, and I was like, what does that mean, that it moved to your bank? And they're like, no, the insurance company is just holding the money for me. Like, what does that mean? And then they started to describe it, and basically what happened is when someone passed away, the money was paid out to them in the form of cash, which was then cleverly wordsmithed into, do you want to just do the same that your relative was doing? And the insurance agent sold a new annuity to the new client and got a brand new commission, because if you took the money out and put it in your checking account or savings account, they would have made nothing. And so there is this ginormous financial incentive for them to do what is in their best interest and what I think is not in your best interest. And maybe they have convinced themselves that the two things are the same. I respectfully disagree. It is probably not in the client's best interest, but there could be theoretically a case where I am mistaken. But, the vast majority of the time, you probably do not want an annuity. So more than I expected to go over today. Got a whole bunch of other things to do and try to catch up from being gone. I got this giant pile of mail, and hopefully I've not left your emails unanswered. If something slipped through and I didn't respond to you, you may, of course, send me a follow-up email. Once again, this is Phil Ferguson, and you are listening to The Phil Ferguson Show. If you like the show, go leave a 5-star review somewhere, or recommend the show to a friend. If you have questions or show topic ideas, you can send me an email, phil@polarisfinancialplanning.com. And I hope to see you out there on the road somewhere at a conference. Until then, ciao.